word that makes people shiver. Most think of Broadmoor as a prison. In fact, it's a high-secure psychiatric hospital and home to some of the country's most dangerous and violent offenders. After 5 years of negotiation, and for the very first time, the hospital has allowed cameras in to meet the men who live behind these walls.
Broadmoor's got all this bloody history about people being all these monsters here, basically. But you can be violent, but that don't mean you're a bad person, because sometimes you're not intending it.
Hello, Bravo 10, Gadwa.
1 going to the Phoenix OT with escort radio Alpha 4, over.
The easiest reaction in the world is to see somebody that has committed something atrocious, label them as evil, want to lock the door and throw away the key.
I've probably actually never said the words of what I've actually done. I've never admitted it. It's still just a blur in my head.
I got born into a satanic family, very, very violent. In some cases, it would have been better to have killed me than to allow me to have this abominable life that I've had.
With unprecedented access and filmed over a year, this series reveals the secrets of life inside Britain's most notorious institution. Broadmoor is perched above the Berkshire village of Crowthorne, just 40 miles from the centre of London. When people think of Broadmoor, they think of Ronnie Kray, Peter Sutcliffe, Robert Napper and Kenneth Erskine, some of the most dangerous killers the country has ever known.
The public perceives this place as, oh, that's where the Yorkshire Ripper is locked up. That's Rachel McKell's killer's locked up. Broadmoor is an institution of lots of people, but not all rapists, paedophiles or murderers. There is people in here for self-harming in prison. There's people in here for burglary who then got ill in prison. And there's people in here for very, very evil things. And the brushes with all the same brush, which they shouldn't do.
First built as a Victorian lunatic asylum for the criminally insane, today Broadmoor is an NHS hospital. Over its 150-year history, it's been a secretive and mysterious institution. Staff are under strict instructions not to discuss patients outside the hospital walls.
Thank you very much.
Many won't even admit to working here.
Close family members know that obviously where we work, but if we're in a normal mainstream, then you would probably say you work in a hospital or something. We don't really talk about the place.
Listen, if you said that you worked in Broadmoor, you'd just spend the whole of the day or the afternoon with a barrage of questions about the place, so it's just easier to say you work for the NHS.
They're told not to share personal information with the patients either, and to leave their private lives along with their possessions at the front door. Broadmoor's most notorious patients, like Peter Sutcliffe and Kenneth Erskine, have chosen not to participate. But many of the men here have been front-page news and are vilified by society. This is the first time they've been allowed to tell their stories.
I've done everything from taking hostages, multiple hostage takings, stabbings, multiple assaults, violent assaults, fire setting. I set a fire in a hospital, psychiatric hospital, the first one I ever went to. Just mainly violence, and my history is mainly violence.
Broadmoor's 200 patients are all men suffering from mental disorders. They're classified as vulnerable adults, and only those who have capacity to give consent have been allowed to talk to us. Their faces have been blurred to protect their identities.
What do you like when you're not on medication?
I'm quite a nasty person. I'm quite violent, or very violent in most circumstances. Very antisocial. I don't like spending time with people. Paranoid. I'm not very paranoid. Every person is around me. I'm thinking what's their intention, and sometimes I come very close to attacking people because I'm thinking that they're going to do something to me, and I don't want to get hurt first. I remember one time without my medication, I spent, I think it was like 11 months locked in a cell, segregated, due to the fact that I was too dangerous to come out.
24-year-old Alex arrived at Broadmoor 7 months ago. He was serving a life sentence in a dedicated prison unit for highly dangerous prisoners. They could no longer manage him.
When I was younger, yeah, we chased a seagull all around my council estate, right? With a box, because I had a broken...
Now on an admissions ward, he's been diagnosed with mental illness and personality disorder and put on medication. One of his symptoms is auditory hallucinations. He hears voices.
I was doing a fruit salad the other day for an assessment. I had to do this assessment for personal motor skills, is like for learning disability. And I was cutting a mango, and I've never used a sharp knife. In the 7 years I've been away, I've not used a sharp knife, and I was shaking, literally. I've nearly cut my fingers off because the voices were telling me to attack the people in the room with the knife, and it was goading me into it. And I thought, I can't do that. So I managed to finish the fruit salad, and I felt, wow, like what achievement. Because most probably a year ago, 2 years ago, I would have done it, you know.
Go on, it's dirty. Everywhere is dirty. I must... No! I'm dirty though!
No, we will clean it afterwards. But we want to give you bedding for now, yeah? Yeah.
This is Cranfield, the intensive care ward, home to the hospital's most acute mentally ill patients.
Okay, I'll do that. Our good Dr. Villeneuve, can we come in? Sit on the bed for us, Dentro.
Any contact with them has to be carefully planned and executed. This is a 6-person unlock. The door to this patient's room can only be opened with 6 staff present.
Bullying, man. Bullying, man. Please.
There's always the risk of violence towards others. You have to accept that, they've got a chronic mental illness and they will be very disturbed throughout the day, but you have to learn to work with them. Our focus when working with these guys is actually telling them that they're here not because of the illness, they're here because of violence. And they'll only progress from here if there's a reduction in that violence. So that message, it might take time, but gradually over a period of time, it starts going through.
On this ward, even the most routine tasks run a risk of violence and involve a protocol. This patient has asked for a drink.
Just give us a minute. She's going to get a coffee, okay? Yeah, Habibi. Shukran. Shukran means thank you, right? You taught me all this. Casablanca. Right. I've got your pen here. If you go sit down, no, the one at the back, all right? Look, you need some more? I've got a house here for you, okay? Thank you.
Life in Broadmoor can be a game of snakes and ladders, with patients moving between the hospital's 15 wards according to their mental state. Patients who are responding to treatment can progress to one of the hospital's assertive rehab wards, where they're given greater freedom. Daniel is one of 12 patients on this ward.
I've been here 5 years. Luckily, I never went to a high dependency ward. I came straight to a rehab. And to be honest, it's been, I wouldn't use the word wonderful because it's not wonderful, but I've been grateful basically to come here. In my spare time, I try and engage in artwork mostly. This was my first real attempt at an actual portrait, all done completely in graphite. And then I moved on to using charcoal along with graphite. And the charcoal allows you to have so much more depth in the tonal quality. And then, yeah, I did a self-portrait. The whole picture was a statement about when I got locked up when I was 14 and I'm now 24. This is me at 24, but that's me back then, sort of thing.
Mental disorder is no respecter of class or education. Daniel was a 14-year-old boy at a mainstream school, and no one anticipated the violence of his attack on his own family. All of the men in Broadmoor present a grave and immediate risk to the public, and many have committed violent crimes, from arson to torture, rape and murder. Unlike a prison sentence, they have no release date.
I've been a bit of a conundrum for the psychologist, and I've had about 9 different diagnoses from 30 different doctors. I've had seminars about me done, I've had people wanting to write books about me, just because of the unusuality of my offence and my age and what happened. I mean, my family are my saving grace, to be honest. You know, they're hugely supportive. And what's even more amazing is that my offence was actually orientated against my family, sort of thing. So the fact, and what a lot of people see is that when a family member has committed an offence against a family member, they often disown them, sort of thing. You know, it's too much for the family, but they've told me that they swore they'd stay by me when I was christened, and they have, sort of thing. You know, they've always agreed I've had Asperger's. One of the problems I have is I'm not very good at understanding emotions, or if I'm feeling something, I don't always understand what it is that I'm feeling. But if I can draw it, I can get out these angry feelings or these frustrations of being locked up, or guilt or remorse, and all these negative feelings I can channel through this imaginative artwork, sort of thing. SB9. I've probably actually never said the words of what I've actually done. I've never admitted it.
After you.
Because I still get flashbacks. It's mainly guilt. I still struggle to bring it to mind. It's still just a blur in my head, and I've done such a terrible thing. That's one of the things that I've got to come to terms with eventually, is that I've done this, it's happened, and it will be with me forever.
We're not allowed to reveal the details of Daniel's offence.
Okay. The only thing I was wondering about was I sort of get problems with fine motor control and spatial awareness, things like that. Like bumping into things and dropping things a lot.
As you say, it's not one of the most common side effects. In fact, the opposite is being reported.
Daniel is taking medication and undergoing psychological therapy. These, together with everyday interaction with staff, are the cornerstones of the treatment here.
Have you noticed any benefit?
I don't really know what it is I'm looking for.
I have noticed a difference on you, not over the last 2 weeks, but certainly over the last 3 months. I think that you are much more able to spend longer time with people on one-to-one situations.
Broadmoor can feel like a ghost town. Patients can only move at certain times and in certain configurations, and cameras record where each patient is at any given moment.
Hello, Alpha, Gulliver.
From Alpha to the Newbury therapy within...
The control room ensures that incompatible patients do not collide.
They're far enough away now for us to carry on.
Patients who are well enough leave their wards to go to work, study, and even once a week go shopping. It's strangely like a village.
We're going to wine gums, and then wine gums or nothing. That's what it is. It's a shop or not. Shut up. You shut up.
What's going on? You sure it's okay?
The freedom to shop is a mixed blessing. One of the side effects of medication is increased appetite, and many patients are severely overweight. However normal it feels, the reminder of the threat of violence is ever present. Searches, looking for potential weapons, are carried out before any patient movement.
This is stuff that we've retrieved from patients.
Okay, this is just what used to be a CD, and it's been broken up into shards. It can be used as a blade, even self-harming. In fact, we don't use the CDs here anymore. We've got spoons and forks that have been sharpened off on the edge. So a normal teaspoon, plastic spoon, which is quite innocent to you and I, has been fashioned off and can be used as a potential weapon to stab. And it's just an example of how vigilant we have to be with everyday items.
I've done a lot of self-harming, as you can see. Cut my own throat a couple of times. Cut my throat about 4 times, I think. Funny enough, part of it, I think it was about 5 weeks before I come in, I hung myself. And they had to do CPR on me in the cell, like, you know. I was sexually abused when I was a child, and that had an effect on my behaviour, on my mental state. Like, I couldn't sleep at night and all the rest of it. I was, you know, basically everything you go through when you've had a traumatic situation like I did. I think as well that being here, I said to my mum, this feels like the best I've ever been in 10 years.
Patients that come here, they will have perpetrated often horrendous crimes, but they are also victims, and it is very easy to see somebody as either the perpetrator or the victim. It is much more difficult to understand that somebody might be both.
Patients from different wards meet at certain events.
First of all, thank you for giving up your time, because we know you could be doing other things and you have different work streams. And a lot of
Today is a diversity workshop, and poet and lawyer Dave Nita is encouraging them to celebrate their different cultures.
We're going to invite you to speak about your own culture, but before that we're going to have lunch.
But most of them are celebrating lunch. With no alcohol or tobacco allowed, food is the only thing they have free rein over.
My mum's Italian and my dad's from a little island in Africa. And I like to say that being multicultural, it helps, you know, and it's good. It's nice to be different, because different is what we need. We don't want everything the same. And that's it.
Oh, how did I end up in here? They said they had a spare bed, so I thought, well, I've been in children's homes, I've been in secure units, I've been in prison. The only place I haven't been is Broadmoor, so I thought I'd come along.
Now 26, Declan was put into care at the age of 9.
I remember the day my mum took me to this office. I sat there on a chair, and next minute she just left. She went, "You're not coming with me." And the social worker come out and she went, "Oh, you got to come with me." I went to children's homes, foster homes. I kept running away because I got abused when I was in the children's home by the staff, sexually and physical. And I think it was like no one would actually listen to me. I ran away to London. I was living on the streets. You know what I mean? I was living out of bins. Yeah, not nice, but when you're on the streets, you have to do that sometimes, you know what I mean?
Yeah, guys, this is called think, yeah? And it goes like this. When you see a tramp out on the street, don't look down your nose so far you see your own feet. When you see people homeless, don't reach for a broom. Consider if you have the means to give them a room.
My victim, me and my co-defendant, basically stabbed them up. The judge classed it under as torture.
As long as I know that I'm black and British and I'm proud of it, and that's me.
You say you've got a child?
Mm-hmm. Got a little boy, he's 7. He lives with his mum. Don't really see him, but I wouldn't expect children to come in a place like this.
And are you still on good terms with his mum?
Not really, no. I started having a bit of a relationship with. So yeah, that was the first time I found out that I was sort of that way. For some reason, I've always wanted to be a woman. And I think that's the way I'll, do you know what I mean? But in this place, you can't do that. They won't allow it.
And I just want to say that I'm gay and I'm proud of it. Thank you.
I want to be a drag queen. That's what I've done for a while.
What's she called?
Crystal.
And what does she look like?
Blonde and just fabulous.
We've come to Chepstow, a medium dependency ward where Lenny wants to show us his artwork.
You do it in your room?
Yeah, I do all my spare pens and waste pens and bits and pieces, using cups for the shapes and bottle tops to draw around.
How long have you been here?
7 years this time around.
Is it not your first time?
No, it's the second time. What do you think of that one? That's the corridors in the ward that are shut down now.
So why are you considered a risk?
Because I think my particular offence was against a consultant psychiatrist. They call them Section 12 approved psychiatrists, and they're very powerful. Not like when you go to ordinary doctor, they work for the Home Office.
He's not happy with life in Broadmoor and tells us he's bringing a High Court case against the hospital.
It costs, I don't know how much. What was the last figure that they said it costs to keep us here every year? Is it £320,000 a year or something? Surely it's wrong to charge a fortune for people like us when it would be nowhere near the amount of settlers in the community.
It costs £300,000 a year to keep a patient in Broadmoor, almost 5 times the cost of keeping someone in prison. Before Lenny came to Broadmoor, he was an outpatient at a psychiatric hospital, where he threatened his psychiatrist with a machete.
Do you think you should be here? Or?
But do you think I sound like a babbling idiot? Because I think, well, no, I don't think I should be here. I think I should be sharing this of my life with other people. I want to share my life with other people. I want to be able to get up in the morning and decide when I have a shave, what I do, when I do it, and be reasonably responsible for my own behaviour, unlike everyone else out there. And I don't think I'll be any more of a danger than whatever's already out there. And I will be honest with you, I am rude here. I can be really furious and angry. You become you're the patients, yeah? That is a term we use to separate you from the rest of society. Well, the last thing on earth, is the truth here, to be given what you call equal rights. What do you think? Do you agree or not? I'm not anti-people, I'm all for people.
Downstairs on the admissions ward, Alex is keen to progress.
I was 7 months I've been here to yesterday. 7 months yesterday. It's taking forever. Are you aware of any beds coming up soon?
His medication has stabilised him. He wants to move from admissions to an assertive rehab ward, where he'll have greater freedom.
That I don't know.
You should know, you're a consultant on there.
Yes, I don't know the time scales because it's not quite within my control.
Back upstairs on Chepstow, Benson, the pat dog, has arrived for his weekly visit. Lenny's behaviour over the past few days is becoming a cause for concern. He's been increasingly manic and hyperactive, and his doctor feels he needs medication. Lenny refuses to take it, so it would have to be forcibly administered by injection.
Hang on, film me. Tell me to let go of me, not to touch me.
I don't want you to be at risk if you guys just...
Tell me not to touch me. This is wrong. You can play with us. I'm not fighting you. We don't want to fight you just for your business. It's not for me, I don't need you. It is. This way. No, come on, you don't want to
Have you guys not locked it up? Guys, we really need to get this started. If you just mind, just please. Okay? All right.
At this point, staff tell us to leave the ward. We're told we can see Lenny the following day.
Anil, can we have a key, please? Make sure no there's anyone in there at the moment.
The day before, we were told to leave the ward when staff were about to forcibly inject Lenny with antipsychotic medication.
Anyone down there?
He's keen to explain what happened after we left.
Come this way. So I moved into here.
He leads us into the seclusion area.
Come in. Right, well, I was on here, and I was, first of all, I was like that way, and I was laying like this, right, and I was trying to say, please don't turn me over, because I'm not trying to fight you, and then they said, well, you're going to get it, and the next thing happened, they all came in, they twisted and turned me, I then made a deal with them on the bed, so I was like this at one point, like that, all started holding me, I was like that, and I said, would you please let me go, and I'll get up. So I went like that, I said, okay, then I had to give it, so I went like that, stood like that, and I took down my pants and trousers and they stuck me there, that's it, and I came out again. That's what happened, but I didn't. What do you think? So what's your opinion about that?
But did you hit one of them?
Yeah, but that's because I've been chased off here.
One of the biggest areas of conflict between certainly doctor and patient is the issue of medication.
This is all sealed, right? It's stifling here sometimes.
One of the difficulties with psychotic disorders is your interpretation of reality is different from other people's. If you genuinely believe there's nothing wrong with you and you don't need any medication, why on earth would you want to take some of the medications that would be up for discussion?
The next thing is the area. Can we open this door, please?
He's particularly angry for two reasons. So one is he doesn't believe he'll benefit from the medication at all. The second reason is that he believes he's involved in a major High Court case against the hospital to expose a range of malpractice, particularly in relation to him, but in general, about how these services are just really keeping people in jobs and don't provide any useful service.
The hospital's defence is just, he's with some of the most notorious people in the country. I'll show you.
He believes we've given him the medication purely to dull his mind and weaken his chances of being successful in that case. In fact, he's not currently involved in any legal action or court case.
No, you're not going in there. Sorry, it's private. I can't let you go. It's private. That's my mess. One mess. And look, can you show mum now? Look at that. That's my mum. That's my mum and me. She's pretty in black and white from the 60s. Here.
He's a man who spent a long time in institutional care. In previous settings, was frequently assaulted. He was violent himself on several occasions, but he was often assaulted.
Do you want a drink or anything? A cup of tea or something? Are you sure? Anything? Soft drink?
Perfect.
Right, thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry to have to wait. There are 11 other people, by the way. Thank you very much.
Just check to make sure all the shadows are covered. So they're checked at the first thing in the morning, again before the patients go back.
Patients who are well enough to go to work can make goods, which go on sale to the public. They're paid 80 pence an hour. Alex has been doing well and is now allowed off the admissions ward to come to work.
Everyone's saying, oh yeah, you're going to move. They said I would have moved by Thursday last week. Nothing's found out. I've been on to my psychiatrist saying, look, why am I still on an admission ward after 8 months when there's a bed for me on rehab? No?
Are you a bit frustrated?
Yeah, it's frustrating, but I'm just at the moment focusing. Next week I've got a visit. Mum and Dad are coming up for 2 days. So, you know, I'll spend some time with my family.
They have a saying here, there's time, and then there's Broadmoor time.
Which episode did you see last of EastEnders? About a week ago. Last night?
Last night, yeah.
Yeah, so what, did they show the man who was pretending to be Nick Cotton's son?
No, I didn't see it.
While medication can often control behaviour, extensive therapy is needed to change it, and that takes time.
I'm in the diary, okay?
Okay.
Estelle Moore is the hospital's lead psychologist. She's been here for 20 years.
All right.
We'll say just carry on with the violent offenders group, what finishes in December.
Okay, right then.
Patients undergo specific therapies depending on their offence, whether it's violence, sex offending, or fire setting.
Understanding relationships and borderlines. No, not borderlines, boundaries.
What sort of actions are safe and contained in relationships? The sorts of things that you would do that feel like normal and safe relationships?
Laughter.
Laughter is okay, so laughing.
Talking sensible. Feeling comfortable with each other.
Declan was found guilty of a life-threatening assault on a man.
Do I feel sorry for him? No. Will I do it again? No. No. I'm missing the sun, I'm missing the surfing. You know what I mean?
Lenny has been on antipsychotic medication for a few weeks. It's had time to build up in his system.
Now he's had the depot injection, the chemicals from that are slowing down his reaction to the point where he has those few more seconds to think, how am I going to reply to this? And he will reply in a much more manner to what you or I would reply to something. I could definitely empathise with them. He hasn't come from a different background to me, but he has come from different parents to me.
Seems to be the case with so many.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. You can probably see, if you go back into the lives of most of our patients, you could probably identify them at 5, 6 years old and say, I'll be seeing you later on, and things like that.
Yeah, he's all right. He's just my buddy. He's just one day he's going to tell the truth as well.
Everyone is born with certain temperaments, with certain predispositions to certain behaviour. And if you've been given a triple whammy of genes, environment, upbringing, childhood adversity, substance misuse, all of those different aspects build up to make the person. And it's a long-term project of gradually putting somebody back together and making sure that they stay in that recovered state.
Things have finally changed for Alex. After 8 months, he's been moved to assertive rehab.
It's better over here, it's a lot better. Got a lot more freedom, key to your door, come out when you want, make hot drinks. Yeah, it's alright.
But it's not all good news. As so often in the past, he's in danger of self-harming. He's had to be put on eyesight observation, which means nurses have to take turns to watch him 24 hours a day.
Because my mental state hasn't been the best. It's not nice, you know, hearing voices and what have you, but, you know, just got to control it, that's all you can do, not let it get to you. Dr. Romero said I'm going to be here for a few years yet.
A few years?
A few years.
How do you feel about that?
I don't mind.
You don't mind?
Nah. I'm here for a reason.
All right.
To get better, innit? So that means I've got to stay a couple of years, then so be it. But I'm getting there now.
You're getting there?
I have a blip. At least there was no violence.
Which is good. Which you should be proud of. At least it shows that you're making, you know, more progress.
Alex's mental state continued to deteriorate. After a couple of weeks on the ward, he did self-harm and had to be moved back to a high dependency ward.
We can.
On Chepstow ward, Dr. Larkin wants to discuss a recent incident involving Lenny and another doctor.
I was saying that I was really pleased that they're now starting to track and find paedophiles in our society, how pleased I was, and that they weren't just ordinary poor folk that were getting nicked, it was also people who were important who were getting found out. Okay. And I'm really pleased about that. And she felt threatened that I was saying it also included a couple of doctors that were nicked for paedophilia.
You're not angry with her about something in her report?
No, I wasn't angry with her. It wasn't directed towards her. It was directed towards the general idea of paedophilia. Because you know, I am a victim of paedophilia for 9 years under the Home Office when I was a child myself, and they've done nothing but bury that fact. Because though I'm an offender, I am an offender and admit that. I'm guilty of the crime that brought me to Broadmoor. I threatened to kill a Section 12 consultant psychiatrist, like you are, with a machete. But I'm not guilty of raping myself.
Well,
I think the issue was that you felt nobody here was competent.
No, I was being tied up, right, raped against my will, alcohol shoved down my throat, right, pacified with all kinds of medicines that belong to that person, not me, so that I would be pliable and agree to having sex, which I didn't want to do. As a 5-6-year-old boy, right, 9 years I was in the system itself, seeing psychologists at the same time of being raped, and nobody did a single thing to help me. You're offering me therapy, and I'm not angry at you. I'm not angry at anybody. I'm angry at the people that did what they did to me. They would never recognise that I was a victim.
So, are we agreeing that you're going to meet with David about options for therapy for you as a victim?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Larkin.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I've got to keep, if I keep trouble free, if I keep out of trouble for 12 weeks, they'll let me work in the cafe.
Yes. You think you can do that?
Be hard, but I'll give it a try.
The most challenging patients are housed here on Cranfield Ward. Any movement outside their rooms has to be carefully planned. Violence is always near the surface. Patients are allowed, one by one, in the yard for limited periods. A patient doesn't want to return to his room.
Okay.
He's gearing for a fight. Well, let's get it started.
Did he tell you?
His primary nurse, Mo, has already given him an extra 30 minutes.
It's a planned intervention to relocate him to his room because his presentation dictates that he could put up a fight.
Do you feel he's been unstable at the moment?
Yeah, very. Yeah. It's quite threatening and verbally abusive at the minute. Yeah.
Mo puts on a camera to record the planned intervention in the event of any violence.
You said half an hour.
Stay out here. I'm coming in. More time. Fuck off! Fuck off!
On the intensive care ward, staff are preparing to move a reluctant patient back to his room from the yard.
Fucking release me! Fucking release me, man!
I'm going home and we're leaving 6 people, so we need to go.
1, 2, 3, 5, 6. There's a lot of people to take.
Yeah, we'll take you down then. 6 of us will take you down. Yeah. Shall we go? Because the minutes to go home.
Go home then, innit? I'm not troubling you.
We need to be ready now because we are ready.
Yeah, turn around for us.
So turn around for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's feed that honey through there to me. Don't worry, we'll do exactly the same. Relax.
Relax.
Bring your next hand to the side. Bring your next hand to the back. Go on, bring it up. Nice, thank you.
Right, move.
Right. Nice and relax, yeah, bro?
The hospital has forbidden us from showing this restraint procedure, even with the patient disguised, on the grounds that he doesn't have capacity to consent. His voice has been replaced by an actor's.
Fuck off! Get off me!
Well known for kicking staff, the patient is asked to remove his shoes. As predicted, he lashes out. The 8 staff members get the patient onto the floor for everyone's safety. They're outside his room. It's back on the floor and a final maneuver to get him safely through the door.
Take his ankles, someone take him off the knees. We're gonna lift him up, okay? Stand.
Once in the room, the patient is placed on the bed, feet furthest from the door. Then one nurse will keep hold of his legs, another his arms, and a third his head.
Start off, man! Start off!
They let go and exit, one by one.
Release the legs.
The last to let go is holding his head and nearest to the door. Whenever force has to be used, staff take time out to reappraise.
Started being verbally abusive and threatening.
Are you okay?
Clenching his fist, swearing. The minute presenting that manner, you know he's going to fight.
You know, you can't predict these things. We did our best to try and manage it. But the most important thing is that everybody is safe and the procedures were followed very well and the patient himself is not harmed or injured.
Yeah. So that's it then, guys. Back to our jobs.
That's it.
Good work. Good work, team. Right.
On average, there are 5 physical assaults a week on staff,
I'm okay, just a scratch.
including punching, kicking, throwing hot liquids, urine and feces. Some are serious enough to warrant the hospital pursuing criminal charges.
Does that happen to you a lot?
It's part of,
Can
you know,
be anyone at any time.
any time, you know. Obviously, you can see their state,
Just put a bit of water in
their mental state is very unstable.
Oh, really unpredictable. Anyway, it was well managed. Yeah. Because at times you can get serious injuries.
So Mo, is every day like this for you?
Sorry?
Is every day like this for you?
Every other day. There are days when the ward will be very settled, the patients are quiet, will be in a happy mood, but not all the time because their mental state tends to subside a lot.
So you were right about him though, weren't you?
Yeah, of course. He's actually, I am his primary nurse, so I know him. You know, you can tell, you can see it's coming. It's about knowing your patients, we know all of them.
So was he complaining about how many of you there were there? He was counting how many staff there were.
He knew that we are ready for action. You know, in as much as they are mentally ill, but they are not stupid. Yeah, some of them, they know exactly what they're doing. It's kind of like pre-planned that I'm gonna get them. And they'll look at the team to say, oh, I think this is a weak team. And then they'll go for it.
Yeah, boom, yeah.
Patients like these on Cranfield can progress. They will eventually move on to other wards and, with time, even out of the hospital.
You watching football on Sunday? The finals? You watching it? We'll bring you out for the activity so you can watch it live, yeah? Good man.